Did Ryan Day say anything this week about preparing Julian Sayin for the atmosphere? So we touched upon that, and Husky Stadium is typically listed in those top 10 lists of most difficult places to play. And obviously, going into the Texas game, there was a full-on audition, run through, and I would think that they would try to simulate something there.
Yeah, and I'm actually writing about that right now for later today, but they'll do all of the silent counts and things like that, and they want to stay aggressive. He said they can't allow the crowd and the atmosphere to dictate how they play, and so they want to get through that. Julian saying we talked to him a couple weeks ago about not being what rattles you, and he's like, I don't get rattled. You might not get rattled, but what if you can't? What if communication is very difficult? So they're going to be doing all of the silent stuff to try to eliminate the cause of or the noise impacting things. But you still got to, you can't have any false starts, because then you don't want to go from a 2nd and 5 to a 2nd and 10 or whatever. So that's going to be key. Just the executing that aspect of it, let alone the quarterback doing his thing. So I'm interested to see what he does, what he looks like, because watching that Texas game, as we're watching it live, it's like this guy is not impacted by this Texas, by the atmosphere, by the magnitude of the game at all. And Ohio State left that game. The coaches left that game saying we could have done more with Julian Sayin. So they want to come out and be aggressive. So we'll see. And the best way to quiet the crowd is to come out, be aggressive, and be successful with it. And then maybe that would be their plan of attack. And I'm not convinced that the Washington secondary is going to be able to hold up against the Buckeyes. I mentioned Alex McLaughlin. He's a transfer from, I think, Northern Arizona, where he's a very experienced player. But it's the corners. They have 2 6'4" corners that are very good, but there's a reason 6'4" corners aren't the norm. It's because they have trouble defending in man-to-man situations and moving the way they need to do. So it's probably still going to be the best cornerback duo Ohio State faces this in the regular season, but I'm more sold on Ohio State's receivers than Washington's secondary.
You're on mute, Steve.
I would agree with you, and I think the X factor for Ohio State becomes how well do the Buckeyes establish the run, and how soon will they go to Bo Jackson? Is he going to start? I tend to doubt it, because they don't want him to, get off on the wrong foot as a freshman in that environment. My guess is it'll be Donaldson, at the beginning, maybe some Peoples, but you got to get to Bo Jackson at some point. 2 games with 100 yards and neither game with 10 carries. They have a list of the 100-yard games in the Ohio State record book, or at least they used to. And I was going to go on a deep dive today to see when was the last time somebody's first 2 games were 100-yard games. And not only that, 100-yard games with less than 10 carries. I would have to think the list of people who've done that is about 0. So that cat's got to play. And because you want it to be 2nd and short for Sayin to have the entire playbook at his disposal, and then 3rd and short for an easy conversion, and then start over again. And that's what Washington does on offense. Coleman gets 7 yards a carry. That's what he's averaging right now. Now, obviously, that's skewed a little bit by who they played. I mean, we can't – at some point you have to stop crapping on Colorado State, Cal Davis, and Washington State and just realize Washington's a pretty good team. But to me, Ohio State's got to win first down, hold Coleman to 1 or 2 yards as often as they can, because it's not going to be every time. And then you have to find a way to win 3rd down, which they are the number 1 team in the country. Washington is, as you'd expect, scoring on 22 straight possessions. They are 75% on 3rd down, which is absurd. I've never heard of anything quite like that. And obviously a small sample size, just 3 games and 3 crappy teams. Oh, I just crapped on them again. So, oh well. But you get the idea. I mean, it's kind of a cat and mouse game on both sides. Who's going to establish the run and make it easiest on their young quarterback? That's kind of how I view this thing. And I think Washington's a little further ahead in that journey than Ohio State is right now.
Well, since we hit on the running backs, and Kevin mentioned this and kind of slid past it about Bo Jackson and about the distribution of carries. Competitive game, let's say at least, within striking distance for the full game. What is the guess on these three backs and how much we're going to see the carry distribution?
I think we'll see them all kind of in that 8 to 12 range. I mean, if Ohio State's able to establish a run and runs the ball, 40 plus times, then, you're going to have to adjust the numbers up. But I think you're going to try and see it. You're going to see it be somewhat equated in there. I mean, obviously, if you say that a close game, which means that the run isn't going to get away from Ohio State in terms of having to try and chase Washington. And I haven't heard anybody around these parts really make it sound like they're going all in on Washington in this game. But, we've talked about it on this show. We've talked about it on other shows. Trevion's high number last year wasn't all that high. Quinshon's high number last year wasn't all that high. You got three backs now that are doing it since Bo Jackson is firmly in the equation now. I would honestly, if you go 3 by 10 right there, that's 30 carries. You're going to probably have a couple of things that are going to be charged as carries to say in whether or not it's a designed run or a scramble or something like that. It's not like we're seeing 85 offensive plays for a team in college football anymore. So, I was going through and Steve was talking about, freshmen and rushes and everything else. So, of course, I went right to Mo Claret. And, you won't forget that in the Kent State game, he only had 11 carries for 66 yards, which broke his 100 yards there. But he was doing it on 21, 31, 21, 29, 18, 30 carries. Just a different game.
Yeah. Just looking at the stats, Bo Jackson's played 2 games and averaged 9 carries. Donaldson has averaged 11 carries per game in his 3 appearances, and James Peoples has averaged 8 carries. So it is, as you just said, 10-10-10 is essentially what I just laid out for you right there. I mean, they found a way, and I think Carlos Lachlan, they're going to have to pin him down and say, bro, we like rotating, we like keeping guys fresh, et cetera, but that cat, number 25 or whatever number he is, I think Jackson's 25, he's got to play. I mean, he is by far the best of the 3. He has got to play.
At least he's not on Dallin Hayden Island where he just Dallin Hayden never played except for when he did, and then he looked good when he played.
Yeah, free Bo Jackson. That's what I say.
Well, I'll say, so they're averaging 61 plays per game. So, if you're talking 30, 35 rushes, you're also like, there will be more rushes if there are fewer home runs in the passing game, because they've got to get those yards somewhere else. So I don't know where those, if the lack of home runs in the passing game will lead to maybe 12, 12, 12, something of that nature. But I will say, like James Peoples, the last 2 games, 7.4 yards per carry and 6.7 yards per carry. So there's still a place for him. There's still a place for CJ Donaldson with his size and experience. And then certainly everybody wants to see more of Bo Jackson. To your question earlier, Steve, about the Buckeyes that have rushed for 100 yards in their first 2 games. So I was looking at that earlier this week and actually after last week's game, and I couldn't find anything. And I even checked Ollie Klein back in like the 40s or whatever. And it wasn't exhaustive, but it wasn't any of the guys that you would think it could be. It was, it wasn't Archie. It was, it wasn't, I don't even know. I don't think it wasn't Tim Spencer. It wasn't Keith Byers. Like I was going back and looking. It wasn't J.K. Dobbins and things like that. So I sent that note to Ohio State for them to research. That way, if they want to go ahead and prop it up, they can. I didn't have the time to do it as exhaustively as I wanted to, but based on what I saw and the fact that there are 100-yard games available through the 50s, they don't go all the way into the mid 40s. I didn't find any that were first 2 games, 100 yards rushing. And in the history of Ohio State, that's pretty impressive. And it's something that you can't ignore, even though, to be fair, it has been against Ohio State's 2 worst opponents this season.
Yeah, kind of the same thing as this great Washington juggernaut. So, Yeah, let's see. The rubber is about to hit the road, guys, and Julian's saying you're starting a redshirt freshman, and Woody used to say you'll have a loss for every freshman you start or first year guy or whatever. And there is a school of thought that when they go on the road to play one of these opponents, they're going to doink off a game, and it won't be anybody's fault. It won't be Julian's fault. It's just going to be just the rub of the green. It's just the way it is. While we've been on the show, I just looked it up. They've had 17 undefeated regular seasons, and then in a bunch of those, they lost the bowl game. So, 17 out of 135, it's not something that happens every other year in terms of regular seasons or overall seasons. So, to me, there's probably going to be a loss somewhere along the line. This is not, they're number one in the country, but I don't view them as this unbeatable team. Certainly, I think that they got to get this rushing offense thing figured out. Got to get the red zone figured out. You got to put the ball in the end zone when you're in the red zone. So, they have room to improve. Let's just say that. So, and is this the game where they doink it off? I don't know, but it'll probably happen at some point.